Welcome to X Crimes. Today we are undertaking a deep dive into, well, frankly, one of the most disturbing and legally frustrating cases you might ever encounter, Issei Sagawa.
It's a name that immediately brings up themes of murder, cannibalism, extreme privilege, and a kind of baffling escape from justice.
Exactly. We're talking about a Japanese man who committed this incredibly notorious crime in Paris, confessed to it, had overwhelming evidence against him.
And yet walked free. Not only walked free, but went on to become this bizarre kind of celebrity figure in Japan. It's astonishing, really.
It is. And central to this story, and someone we must remember throughout this discussion, is the victim, Renee Hartevelt. She was a 25-year-old Dutch student in Paris studying French literature.
Her life was brutally taken in 1981. And as you said, it's crucial we keep her in focus because the narrative that followed often completely overshadowed her and the crime itself.
That's the core paradox, isn't it? How does a confessed killer, caught red-handed, avoid prison entirely?
Well, it wasn't about lack of evidence or a bad investigation. The evidence was ironclad. It was more of a catastrophic failure at the intersection of two different legal systems, a bureaucratic collapse, essentially.
So that sets up our mission for this deep dive. We need to explore really three key questions. First, how did Sagawa's background, his family's immense wealth and influence, shield him, not just after the crime, but maybe even enabling it?
Right. And second, the big one. How did this clash between French and Japanese law create such a perfect, almost unbelievable loophole for him?
And finally, what does his subsequent career, calling it a career feels wrong, but his decades as this media figure, this so-called anti-hero, tell us about, well, society's fascination with crime, mental illness, and fame?
It's a lot to unpack. Maybe the best place to start is right at the beginning, his origins.
Okay. Issei Sagawa, born in Kobe, Japan, 1949. And his start in life was, as you hinted, defined by this weird contradiction.
Yeah. On the one hand, incredible wealth. His father, Akira Sagawa, was president of Kurita Water Industries, a huge company. His grandfather edited a major newspaper, the Asahi Shimbun. They were elite.
Top-tier Japanese society. But on the other hand,
Extreme physical vulnerability. He was born incredibly premature, apparently small enough to fit in his father's hand. He immediately suffered from enteritis, a serious intestinal disease.
so he survived, but he was left very frail, small in stature, only about 4'9", as an adult, sickly, introverted, just physically weak.
And that physical difference seems to have really shaped his psychology. Sources describe a deep-seated inferiority complex, intense isolation.
He couldn't compete physically, so he retreated into literature, which ironically he was good at. He ended up getting a master's in English literature.
But it's in that internal world where the darker impulses started to emerge. He claimed his cannibalistic fantasies began incredibly early.
How early are we talking?
Age 6 or 7, according to him. He specifically recalled seeing a classmate's thigh and having this sudden, overwhelming urge to bite it, to eat it. He linked it to wanting to absorb her health, her vitality, qualities he felt he lacked.
Now, is that something he said later, after he was famous for the crime, or is there any corroboration?
That's a very fair point. Most of this comes from his own memoirs and interviews later on, which he profited from. So you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Right. Self-serving narrative.
But there are some documented environmental factors. He was apparently fascinated by Hansel and Gretel. And there's this disturbing game his uncle used to play, pretending to be a boy-eating giant, chasing the kids, pretending to cook them. Sagawa said he felt this mix of terror and excitement. It seems to have wired something strange in him early on.
Linking eating human flesh to power, maybe. Escaping his own weakness. And then there was the sexual aspect, which was also developing in a really unhealthy environment.
Definitely. His family, despite the wealth, was apparently very repressed about sexuality. It was taboo. He said his first sexual feelings made him think he was seriously ill.
That confusion led to some deeply disturbing places.
Yes. He later admitted to acts of bestiality with the family dog when he was young. It shows how his desires were immediately tangled up with transgression, with something forbidden and, well, wrong.
Okay, so this hidden turmoil, these dark fantasies, they finally bubble up into attempted action in 1972. He's in Tokyo, 24 years old, at university.
That's right, Waco University. He followed a tall German woman home, broke into her apartment. His plan was apparently to slice off a piece of her buttocks to eat. He delusionally thought she might not even notice.
Unbelievable. But it failed.
It failed purely because of his size. She woke up, easily overpowered him, and the police were called. Crucially, though, when arrested, he didn't confess the cannibalistic intent. He claimed it was attempted rape.
And this is where the family money comes in, isn't it? The first major intervention of privilege.
Absolutely. His father, Akira Sagawa, stepped in immediately, used his resources, paid the victim a very large, undisclosed settlement.
So she drops the charges.
Exactly. The money smoothed it over, the charges were dropped, and legally, the incident basically never happened. No trial, no conviction, no criminal record.
But surely someone realized how dangerous he was.
Apparently, yes. A psychiatrist who examined him at the time reportedly concluded he was extremely dangerous and had deep-seated perversions, a massive red flag.
Which was completely ignored.
Utterly ignored. Instead of mandatory long-term treatment, which seems obvious in hindsight, the family chose a different route: removal, distance.
They sent him away.
His father paid for him to go abroad in 1977 to Paris to study for a PhD in French literature at the Sorbonne. The wealth didn't just get him off the hook. It literally exported the danger.
Setting the stage for the tragedy in Paris, it's just staggering how that first warning was missed, or rather deliberately bypassed.
It paved the way. He arrives in Paris in '77, ostensibly a student, but secretly, his pathology was escalating. He later admitted some chilling things about his time there before the murder.
Like what?
He confessed he would often bring sex workers to his apartment with the full intention of shooting them. He described it as trying to get some practice in.
Practice for murder.
Yes. He said he'd have the gun ready, but would always freeze up at the critical moment. This wasn't a sudden impulse crime. It was something he was actively working towards for years.
Until Renee Hartefeld.
Until Renee, a fellow student, Dutch, 25 years old, studying French literature. She was tall, about 5'10", intelligent, vibrant, everything he felt he wasn't.
And he targeted her specifically for those reasons.
That's what he claimed. He saw her as the embodiment of health and beauty, things he desperately craved. His motive was this twisted cannibalistic fantasy that by consuming her, he could literally absorb her qualities is deeply pathological.
So how did he orchestrate the crime? June 11th, 1981.
He used his academic connection. He invited her to his apartment, claiming he needed her help recording some German poetry for a class assignment. A complete fabrication, obviously.
I carefully laid trap.
Exactly. She sat at his desk, reading the poetry, her back turned to him. That's when he shot her in the neck with a .22 rifle he had acquired.
The level of premeditation is undeniable. The weapon, the lure, the timing.
Absolutely. And then something psychologically interesting happened immediately after. He fainted, passed out from the shock of his own actions.
So, despite years of fantasy, the reality was still too much for him initially.
It seemed so. But he recovered, and then he proceeded with the rest of his horrifying plan. Necrophilia first, then the cannibalism.
And the details here are grim, but necessary to understand the legal situation later. He couldn't just bite her.
No. He tried, apparently, but the skin was too tough. This detail actually highlights his methodical approach. He realized his initial plan wasn't working.
So what did he do?
He actually stopped, left the apartment, went to a shop, bought a proper curved meat knife, and came back. Later, even that wasn't enough, so he used an electric carving knife.
Just methodically preparing the body parts he wanted to consume.
Over the next 2 days, he ate parts of her breasts, her face, buttocks, thighs, neck. He treated it like some grotesque culinary experiment, eating some raw, cooking others, frying, baking, grilling. He even mentioned using mustard.
And his description of it? It's chillingly detached.
Completely. He described human fat as corn-colored. The meat is soft and odorless, melting like raw tuna. It's the language of complete objectification. He'd reduced her entirely to meat, fulfilling that power fantasy.
And he documented it all.
Meticulously. He took photographs at every stage. He stored parts in his refrigerator and freezer, planning to eat them later. These weren't just crime scene remnants, they were trophies.
But he couldn't keep the body there indefinitely.
Right. After 2 days, decomposition started to set in, forcing him to dispose of the rest. He dismembered the remains and packed them into 2 very large, very heavy suitcases.
His plan was to dump them in the Bois de Boulogne, a well-known park in Paris.
Yes, but the disposal attempt was almost darkly comical in its failure. He hailed a taxi to get there. The driver sees this tiny man struggling with these incredibly heavy bags, and he jokes, what is there, a body in here or something?
Then Sagawa's response
Just nervously claims it's heavy books. Unbelievable nerve.
But at the park, it went wrong.
He couldn't manage the weight easily. He was struggling to drag the suitcases, which were apparently leaking blood. An elderly man saw him, became suspicious, opened one of the bags and screamed.
And Sagawa just walked away.
Didn't panic, didn't run, just calmly walked off, abandoning the suitcases and the horrific evidence inside.
But the taxi driver remembered him.
Exactly. The driver gave the police Sagawa's address. 4 days after the murder, they arrested him at his apartment.
And he confessed immediately.
Instantly. Reportedly said, "I killed her to eat her flesh." No ambiguity. And inside the apartment, police found everything. The remaining body parts, the rifle, the knives, the photos, the recordings. An open and shut case, you'd think.
Which brings us to the part that defies belief. The legal aftermath. How does that confession, that mountain of evidence, lead to him walking free?
Okay, so this is where the French legal system and the Sagawa family's resources collide. He was held for about 2 years while the French authorities investigated and evaluated him. His father, again, hired a top-tier defense lawyer.
And the psychiatric evaluation was key here.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Under the French legal code, which is different from, say, the US or UK system, the concept of non-responsible, mentally irresponsible is central. French psychiatrists examined Sagawa extensively.
And their conclusion?
They declared him legally insane, mentally irresponsible at the time of the crime. This isn't just saying he had mental illness. It's a legal finding that he couldn't understand the criminality of his actions, lacked the necessary criminal intent, the mens rea.
So, if you're legally insane,
you were deemed unfit to stand trial. In 1983, Judge Jean-Louis Bruguière accepted the psychiatric findings. The murder charges were dropped, completely dropped.
But he wasn't just released then.
No. The ruling mandated indefinite commitment. He was ordered to be held in a secure mental institution, Santan Hospital, potentially for the rest of his life.
Okay, so confined, but not convicted. How did the French public react to that?
Predictably, with outrage. You have this foreigner who committed this horrific cannibalistic murder against a young European student, and now French taxpayers are footing the bill to keep him in a mental hospital indefinitely. There was huge public pressure.
And Sagawa's family saw an opportunity there.
It seems so. They leveraged the public outcry. His father continued to apply pressure, lobbying, and reportedly providing significant funding to facilitate a solution acceptable to the French authorities.
Which was deportation.
Exactly. Sometime between 1984 and 1986, the exact timing is a bit fuzzy in reports, French authorities agreed to deport him back to Japan. They essentially washed their hands of him.
And this is the precise moment the legal loophole cracks wide open.
This is it. Because he was found legally insane in France, and the criminal charges were dropped before trial, the French legal system sealed all the records related to the case.
Sealed them? Meaning what?
Meaning, under French law protecting individuals deemed insane, the evidence, the autopsy reports, the police files, the psychiatric evaluations, everything became confidential. They legally could not or would not transfer these crucial documents to the Japanese authorities.
So Sagawa lands back in Japan.
And is immediately committed to Matsuzawa Hospital in Tokyo for evaluation. But legally speaking, he arrives as a blank slate in the eyes of Japanese law.
Because Japan has no official evidence.
None whatsoever. No conviction from France, and no access to the sealed French files containing the proof of the crime. They couldn't just take his confession without the corroborating evidence legally required for a prosecution in Japan.
What did the Japanese psychiatrists conclude? Did they agree with the French?
Completely the opposite. The Japanese psychiatrists examined him, and their unanimous conclusion was that Sagawa was sane. Definitely not legally insane.
Sane. Then what was their diagnosis?
They diagnosed him with a severe personality disorder and sexual perversion. They saw the crime not as a product of psychosis or delusion, but as stemming directly from these long-standing deviant urges. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but did it anyway because of his disorder.
Okay, so now Japan has a man their own experts call sane but perverse who confessed to murder, but they can't prosecute him.
Precisely. An impossible situation. They had no legal grounds to charge him with René Hardevelt's murder under Japanese law without the French evidence. It was a total impasse born from two different legal systems prioritizing different principles. French law protecting the rights of the legally insane, Japanese law demanding concrete evidence for prosecution.
And the outcome of this bureaucratic nightmare?
The outcome was that on August 12, 1986, after just 15 months in Matsuzawa Hospital, Issei Sagawa simply checked himself out. He was legally free to go.
A self-confessed murderer and cannibal released onto the streets because of a legal technicality.
A technicality born from an international legal clash. It's widely regarded as one of the most profound miscarriages of justice.
And you can only imagine the media storm that followed in Japan.
Oh, it was immediate. And this is where the story takes another deeply unsettling turn. He didn't hide or show remorse. He leaned into the notoriety.
He became famous because of the crime.
Exactly. He transitioned almost instantly from infamous killer to some kind of bizarre celebrity, an anti-hero, a cultural icon. These were terms actually used in the Japanese media at the time.
How did he capitalize on this?
Primarily through writing. His memoir, In the Fog, which unbelievably was published while he was still technically committed, became a bestseller upon his release. Sold over 200,000 copies.
And it detailed the crime. Explicitly.
Gruesomely so. The murder, the dismemberment, the taste, the textures, he held nothing back. Now it's just the start. He wrote over 20 books in total.
20 books? About what?
Many revisited his crime. Some were commentaries on other crimes, like the notorious Kobe child murders. He even collaborated on manga Japanese comics, graphically illustrating his own actions.
The media must have enabled this.
Absolutely courted him. One publisher paid him a reported $20,000 just for an article about the murder. And then, perhaps the most surreal example, he became a restaurant reviewer for a magazine called Spa.
Wait, the cannibal wrote restaurant reviews?
Yes, the sheer morbid irony. It speaks volumes about how his pathology was being normalized, even intellectualized, for public consumption.
What does that say about the society consuming it? Was it just shock value or something deeper?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some analysts argue it reflects a particular dynamic in Japanese true crime media, where extreme cases can sometimes lead to the perpetrator being framed as an eccentric, almost fascinating figure once the initial horror fades.
The focus shifts from the victim and the violence to the killer's psyche.
Pretty much. He was a frequent guest on talk shows, treated as a commentator, an expert on the grotesque. His narrative, his perspective, constantly took center stage, and René Harteveldt's name just faded from public memory.
Did the exploitation go beyond books and TV?
Oh yes, his notoriety spread internationally. The Rolling Stones wrote the song Too Much Blood, inspired by his case. Domestically, he even appeared in several adult films, often playing roles that directly referenced his crime, sadosexual voyeur parts, scenarios involving humiliation fetishes. It was pure exploitation of his known pathology.
There was one particularly disturbing incident mentioned in the sources, right? A reality porn show.
Yeah, that was perhaps the nadir. He spent 24 hours filming with a co-star, engaged in sexual activity, and then on camera told her about the cannibalism and showed her the actual crime scene photos he still possessed.
That's just beyond comprehension. What happened?
The reaction was, understandably, intense. But the follow-up is even stranger. Reports suggest he and the co-star actually became friends afterwards, with her supposedly helping him manage his urges. It points to this complete, almost surreal normalization of his horrific past.
His entire identity, his income, his social life, all built on the foundation of murder and cannibalism.
For decades. He even turned to art later, painting nudes, often reflecting his known obsessions and selling them. The market was there because the pathology itself was the product.
While he was building this grotesque career, what happened to his family, the ones whose wealth initially protected him?
They didn't escape the fallout. The privilege that shielded him ultimately destroyed their public lives. His father was forced to resign as president of Creta Water Industries. His mother reportedly attempted suicide due to the shame and global spotlight.
Did they remain supportive?
They both passed away in 2005. And in a final telling act, Sagawa was explicitly forbidden by his extended family from attending their funerals. They cut him off completely. Only his younger brothers seemed to remain in contact later on.
It really brings it full circle, doesn't it? If they hadn't intervened after that first assault attempt in Tokyo.
It's almost certain René Harteveldt would still be alive. Their actions, intended perhaps to protect the family name or him, directly enabled the later tragedy. A devastating consequence of privilege misused.
Did Sagawa himself ever express remorse or claim his urges faded with age?
Not really. In interviews much later, like one with Vice in 2011, he was quite open that the cannibalistic desires never went away.
Still, even in his 60s.
Yes. He claimed his focus might have shifted less on tall Western women, more towards Japanese women, specifically mentioning women from Okinawa, but the underlying urge remained.
How did he say he managed it?
He admitted linking the fantasies to masturbation, essentially redirecting the impulse into a solitary act to prevent himself from acting on it externally. He said things like seeing beautiful legs still made him think they looked delicious. He was constantly living with it.
Just managing this monstrous urge internally.
And he had this incredibly bizarre final wish he expressed publicly. He wanted to be killed, slowly and painfully, by a beautiful female cannibal. A complete reversal, wanting to be consumed himself. It speaks volumes about the enduring nature of his obsession.
What happened to him in his final years? Did the fame and money last?
Eventually, the novelty wore off. Publishers became less interested. His welfare benefits were reportedly cut. His finances suffered. Then in 2013, his health took a major downturn.
What happened?
He had a stroke, a cerebral infarction, which caused permanent neurological damage. It left him confined to a wheelchair, needing daily care, often provided by that younger brother,
who, according to some sources, had his own issues.
There were reports or rumors suggesting the brother also harbored similar cannibalistic thoughts, which adds another layer of darkness to the family dynamic.
Yeah, and Sagawa eventually died.
Yes, on November 24th, 2022. He died in a Tokyo hospital from complications of pneumonia. He was 73 years old.
73 years old. Having lived decades as a free man after committing one of the most infamous crimes imaginable, never serving a day in prison for it. So, looking back at this whole horrifying story, what are the main takeaways? What does the Sagawa case ultimately tell us?
Well, it's a stark lesson on several fronts, isn't it? First, the destructive potential of unchecked privilege. How wealth and influence didn't just protect him, but actively enabled his path to murder.
Second, the sheer absurdity of legal systems failing to communicate. That bureaucratic loophole prioritizing procedure over fundamental justice for René Hartefeld.
Absolutely. And third, this deeply unsettling phenomenon to society, or at least parts of the media, turning pathology into profit. Monetizing horror, making a killer a cultural curiosity.
It raises that difficult psychological question you touched on earlier, why didn't he kill again, despite the urges persisting?
And the most compelling theory, though it's uncomfortable, is that his very fame, his constant retelling and performing of the crime for the public, acted as a kind of substitute, a psychological release.
So the endless books, interviews, media appearances, that was his way of continually re-experiencing the power fantasy without needing to physically repeat the act.
It's plausible. The constant narration, the public gaze, the notoriety itself might have become the outlet that channeled those dangerous impulses. The exploitation that funded his life might have ironically served as a perverse form of control.
A truly disturbing thought, that the mechanism of his fame, built on the murder, might have been the very thing that prevented more victims.
A dark, complex, and deeply unsatisfying legacy.
Thank you for listening to X-Crimes. If you want more true crime deep dives, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media.